Hi there. In this continuing series on resilience, I would like to speak about the ability or the usefulness of focus. So, one of the problems with focus is that in times of anxiety, so times of crisis or difficulty, it is in the first place very difficult to focus on anything other than the things that threaten us or that disrupt our lives. It is unfortunately the nature of anxiety to keep us focused on the future in a way that predicts that bad things will come our way, or maybe even worse, that we can't predict what comes our way, but whatever comes our way will be bad and that it will have a negative impact. Now, this is, of course, the result of many centuries of evolution, thousands upon thousands of years, where our forefathers had to pay attention to where they were and what might happen next in a way that would aid their survival. So these are very deep instincts, I think would be an appropriate word to use here. So we tend to focus on our environment and on the future in a way that is most likely to point out to us the things that are bad or dangerous, detrimental, and in the process, we are likely to lose the ability to focus on things that are a little bit more useful. Of course, there are times in our lives where our focus is, I wanted to say hijacked, but maybe hijacked is the right word, by other primal instincts like the instinct of desire, and where we then usually either with fairly pleasant feeling or with frustration, we experience our environment and the future through that particular desire or that particular instinct of desire. So, for the purposes of our discussion today, I'm not going to speak about those instances. I'm going to rather focus on how anxiety plays a role in predicting negative futures, and how we can maybe try to think our way around that. In my previous video, I spoke about the importance of structure, and the I think the essential suggestion there was that one should try to identify the things that are most important to you, your highest values, and build your rituals and your routines around those things that are most essential to you in terms of your values. So if health is particularly important to you, then to do things that will contribute to your sense of feeling healthy, like exercise, still watching what you eat. Even though these things are inhibited, I'll use myself as an example. So one of the things that I pay quite close attention to health. So it is, I'm not sure that I would put it at the very top of my list, but it is a fairly high ranking value for me. And one of the particular ways to express that is to go to gym. Now, of course, this video is happening at a time of what we're speaking of as the lockdown in South Africa. Most of the Western world and developed world, Asian countries included, have introduced some form of isolatory kind of practice, and as such, people don't gather in large groups anymore, large spaces, and therefore I can also not go to gym. Now, because health is a primary value, there's some frustration there that, of course, I can't get to the place where I train and therefore try to enhance my own health. But because health is an important issue to me, I also not only do I not want to get infected, I also don't want to infect other people. It's one of the reasons I'm not at the moment practicing at my office. I have no desire to inflict this virus or contamination on my patients or raising their risk profile. So my staying at home then is an expression of, amongst other things, that particular value of health. And it's important to see how one can adapt around that primary value. So the only way, I meant to say that there isn't only one way for me to practice my health and to see gym as the only way to practice it. I have to say to myself, well, look, health is still important, and how am I expressing these things or this value in my life right now with these circumstances? So, of course, still I exercise at home as best I can, and I try to still, to the degree that it's possible, watch what I eat. Try to avoid practices that are not related to that value to the best of my ability. So I'm using this as an example of saying, if you can recognize your particular value, you will probably find that you express that value in varieties of ways in your life. But a lot of those ways might be impacted by some form of crisis. And as such, it is still important to remain true to your values, to those things that are meaningful, that speak to your soul, that lifts your spirit, or however you would like to describe that, the things that are important, valuable. So to build your structure around those values, that was the message of the previous video. So coming to focus, so one of the ways to deal with the anxiety that stems or that flows from crises like the one that we are in at the moment, or the pandemic, is to foreshorten the future. So bring the time horizon a bit closer. So to look at, okay, what am I going to do today? Now, I can imagine a whole chorus of people shouting out the notion or the idea that, but look, you have to plan for the future. Well, yes, you do. I think the dilemma with crises is that it throws the certainty of the future into disarray. So it becomes very difficult to know specifically what the future will hold and what we will be capable of in the future given current circumstances. I also want to just add that, of course, this idea is not limited to this particular point in time. So the particular crisis that you may face might be an emotional one. Let's say you've gone through a very difficult divorce or loss of a relationship, or you've had some negative impact on your health or something like that. You may not be able to know for certain what your future holds. So, of course, it's still pleasant and sometimes even valuable to imagine a future in which these impediments do not exist. But that's not the same as planning. So, all right. So how does foreshortening the future and planning fit together? I think it was General Eisenhower who spoke of that plans during wartime are essential, but going into battle, all plans have to be discarded. So plans structure us, but they cannot, because they don't have absolute predictive value, and because real life is a lot more messy and tricky than anything that we can usually imagine. They cannot ride roughshod over us. They cannot become a form of tyranny that we hold like a sword above our own heads. So we plan as best we can. Right now, the whole world is holding its breath in terms of the economic impact that this whole pandemic is going to have, and it certainly will. But how to know where to put your money? Well, I often say to my clients that one really should not take financial advice from your therapist, if you ought to take any advice. So I can't answer that question for you. But if you are like most people, you are probably a little bit unsure as to what the financial and economic future looks like. So can you plan? Perhaps you can. Perhaps you have some insight that most of us don't have. And all the power to you if you do have that insight. The fact of the matter is that the future remains uncertain. So currently we have the pandemic. But what if something else goes wrong that affects one of the large economic giants of the world, or maybe has an international effect like this pandemic has? We simply don't know. We also don't know to the other side that there might not be a sudden discovery that alleviates all the stress and anxiety that we have around the virus at the moment. So we don't know. Things might go better really soon, or things might go more or less as predicted, or things may go worse. We don't know. That is not to say that we then only live for today. But today becomes maybe the most predictable unit of time that we can focus on. And sometimes not even that much. So to foreshorten the future, bring the time horizon closer, means to adapt in terms of your current resourcefulness. If you have the inner and or outer resources to plan ahead for your day, or maybe a few days in advance, that's good. But you have to adapt it to your own ability. It is a bit like doing a breathing exercise. My lung capacity, your lung capacity won't be the same. Even if we are doing more or less the same exercise, the volume of air that we inhale will be different. So your capacity needs to be your guide here, not the tyranny of what you should, but what you can. So to figure out what the best unit of time is that you can make use of, and I'm going to speak of planning your day. So to figure out, in your day, right now today is Monday. So in your day, what is it that lies ahead? What are essential expressions of your inner values, and what activities will best exemplify those values? I don't think one should try to be exhaustive and try to satisfy each and every value that you might hold. At best, I would suggest a short list of maybe 5. If you are a bit more ambitious, maybe double that. But if your resources are impeded, then maybe one expression of something that is valuable becomes what you are capable of, and that's fine. But then you need to try and commit to that, and you put that into a time bracket into your day, and you do whatever the activity is that expresses that particular value. All right. So what do you focus on? You focus on the thing in front of you once you've done your planning for the day. And again, For you, it might be a couple of days, or it might be a week, or it might be a few hours, or maybe the next 10 minutes. But you focus on the thing right in front of you right now. And you do that thing to the best of your ability. We may not always be successful, but we try our best and we focus on that thing. And once that thing is done, you focus on what's next. Now, what's next might be rest and recuperation. It might be some nonsensical activity. It might be watching some TV. It might be sleeping. It doesn't have to be something that is necessarily productive in the eyes of society. It has to be something that you are capable of and that will leave you feeling either neutral or slightly better, if possible. At the end of your day, you need to be able to look back and to say, oh, most of this was good enough. If I could have another day like this tomorrow, it wouldn't be too bad. I don't think we strive here for perfection, but we try to focus on the good thing that we've instituted, and that's next. Now, anybody with children, for instance, knows that it's very difficult to always stick to that. Of course, you need to take your own circumstances into account, that's fine. But to the degree that it's possible for you, focus on what's next. So even if your child comes to you, let's say you have a young child of 4 or 5 years old, and he or she asks of you to pay attention to them, and you were busy, let's say, with doing the dishes, and you know you have time later on to do the dishes, it's maybe okay to say, okay, well, this is the next thing, this is actually important to me, and to then pay attention to your child until you can get back to the dishes later. So again, this attempt at focusing is not to provide you with a new way of beating yourself over the head. It is a way to structure your time and to make the most productive use of your time in terms of the things that are valuable. All right, I might speak about focus a little bit more, but I don't want to make the videos too long. So please, if this is valuable, either subscribe and or suggest subscription to other people. If you have any questions, queries, or suggestions, please put them in the comments. I'd like to read them and get more ideas. And until we speak again, I hope you are safe and healthy and that you can pursue your happiness in whatever way makes sense to you at the moment. Bye-bye.